I was just looking around the room just to make sure you're already inside, deciding to choose the side of the room for some mysterious reason. Now, ladies, the stage is all yours. We are going to cover a super important topic for the closing of day one of CEBioForum, and obviously the topic is clinical validation. Now, I'm sure some of you, those who are left in the room after another coffee break, more and more will be coming, hopefully. Let me introduce our guest. Anna Cyranka, VP Program and Alliance Management, representing BioTech. Agnieszka Kulesza, Chief Operating Officer, Member of the Board, Biokinetica, Joint Stock Company. Magdalena Marciniak, Director Business Development and Alliance Management at Raivu Therapeutics, Joint Stock Company. Again, welcome. Applause, please. I know we've had lunch, we've had lots of espressos. Important topic, over to you. Enjoy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We know it's the last session, so we are also aware of the fact that your patience is probably limited, so we'll try to keep it concise, informative, but also short. We did discuss, the three of us, before how to best handle it, and we have decided we'll start with a short introduction of our company, so you also understand what type of background we have and why we are probably talking about same thing in a bit different manner. So I will start from myself. I work for BioTech. It's an Icelandic startup company developing biosimilars, so kind of generic therapeutics of biological drugs. And when it comes to the clinical trials, each of the molecule we're developing requires phase 1 and full phase 3 clinical study, and this is probably where I would be mostly focusing on. And also, I mean, next to me, Agnieszka, we have a bit of cooperation as well. So it's really a pleasure for me to hand over to you, Agnieszka, and say a few words about Biokinetica.
Thank you very much, Ania. My name is Agnieszka Kulesza. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Biokinetica. Biokinetica is a dedicated phase 1 unit, so we are specialized in conducting simply early clinical trials, starting from complex first-in-human trials to biosimilars, bioequivalent studies with biosimilar products. We are located in Poland, near Warsaw. We have the clinical research unit, which is fully hospital setup, 50 beds, in-house laboratory, pharmacy, everything which is needed to conduct real phase 1, including first-in-human trials. So I'm really happy to be today with you, with all of you, and also because we are doing clinical trials together with Ania. Thank you very much for the organizing, for inviting me, and I will be very happy to dig a little bit more into the clinical side perspective. So I do not represent the CRO perspective or the sponsor perspective, but the clinical research. I hope this would be interesting for you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Magda Marciniak. I work for Raivu Therapeutics. The company is focused on the discovery and development of the small molecules in oncology. And the perspective of the company as ours is, I think, important from the point of view that we were learning our lesson over the development of the asset. And I think that our lessons, the good lessons and maybe less successful lessons, will give a good perspective of how we develop and how we prepare ourselves for the clinical development, and what is the role of corporate development and business development in the preparation for the clinical trials.
Thank you for all the introduction. So maybe just a bit of a basic few words about the clinical trials. I think everyone here, present, understand the importance of the clinical studies. Each new medicinal product requires the clinical part for the registration, and of course, depending on the type of the product, we are developing, different companies are having, different strategy towards running the clinical study. Obviously, for small startup, it's more about, going into the early phases and just proving that the candidate is powerful, is worth further development. For big pharma, it's totally different story. They typically are able to cover the full panel from phase 1 to phase 3 and post-approval phase 4. And then there are some kind of in the middle situations where companies like mine or the generic business needs to make sure that the product is really comparable to the originator molecule and still need to prove it in the clinical setting. I mean, having said that, there's no way to get away from the clinical studies. This is a must package for all the registration, and that's why we also think it's quite interesting to discuss a bit how to prepare for that. And I think our first question which we wanted to unpack is when to start to prepare for clinical study. And I would like to hand over to Magda, who volunteered to start, kick off this discussion.
And when we were preparing for this session, we decided that it's quite important to define or to highlight that the preparation for the clinical development and clinical trials, it takes time, and in case of companies which are not experienced in clinical development, it takes several years because the process is not established and know-how is not there. So if we decide to go to clinical trials, in fact, the decision to prepare has to be made when we select the target, when we select the indication for our project, when we define the strategy for the company, how we're going to find the research. So in fact, the decision that what we want to do with the company and what's the mission of the company, it's somehow defined. That's the moment to prepare the capabilities, the know-how, the knowledge, the network of people we will work with. So in case of Review, which was established in 2007, I think it was also the moment when we said, okay, we want to be the company which will conduct the clinical trials in the future. We want to do it, so we have to think about it when we select the project for the further development. And in case of our leading asset, which is currently in phase 2, the capabilities were selected. I think I can easily say it was like more than 10 years ago that we said, okay, let's start to build knowledge about clinical development. And it goes together with how to secure funding for the clinical development, how to get people for the clinical development. Do we want to have our clinical team in-house, or we will rely on the consultants? So I think that the scientific development, the early stage development of the assets and the selection what to do with the project is also the moment when we have to define the development strategy for clinical development.
I can only add to what Magda said, that you have to also find right time to reach your potential, of course, CRO, or if you have your own in-house resources at the pharmaceutical biotech company, to reach out to the best region, geographical region, to find appropriate sites, and of course to find a pool of patients or the site which has access to naive pool of patients and healthy volunteers. So those are strategic, I would say, decisions. And the sooner you take this decision, the sooner you find appropriate clinicians who will help you to build up your documentation, your study assumptions, your study protocol, including this clinical input. It's crucial, because I must say that we have seen lots of undoable protocols that went through Biotech's committee, regulatory agencies, but they were simply not doable. And you have to remember that paper, of course, you can have everything on paper, but this will not work in the clinic.
If I can add on this, this is also something that maybe for some of you it will not be correlated, but we were discussing during preparation that when we think about the development of the assets which we have, we also have to think about patent protection for the regions where we want to implement the drug later on, where we want to have market implementation when we want to sell the drug, if the ambition of the company is to put the drug on the market, or if we want to find the partners for the asset, we need to think about geography and the aspects of the commercialization for different markets. And this is highlighted in the patent protection, and then it's highlighted in the way how we select sites for the recruitment. So this is what Agnieszka said. When we think about the clinical development, we have to think also about the potential of the asset to be on the market, and what's the strategy for implementation of the drug, and what's the patient population for us, and it will go together with all decisions we'll make when defining the clinical development.
I would maybe add a little bit step before, at least from our perspective. It is also very important to get the regulatory agency buy-in in the overall strategy. I mean, whether it's FDA, whether it's EMEA, I mean, Japanese, PMDA, and others, because we have also seen quite several times it is quite often not enough to meet them once. They are quite rigid. You know, you prepare your briefing book, you send it to them, you get your response, and then obviously they will address some comments to a certain extent. And we did face quite often that we need 2-3 rounds for a given molecule of discussion, and it takes time. It's usually 3 months before you get the meeting with the agency. Sometimes you need more time to dig into literature to prepare. So when you think about when, I think you also need to have enough time to make sure that later on, when you file and you want your drug to be approved, you are in line with the agencies. And from our perspective, we typically develop products globally. So now trying to find a protocol that will make happy FDA, EMEA, and PMDA, those are typically the 3 that we are aiming, is also not an easy one. And sometimes we're just playing an open cards and showing, I don't know, to folks at EMA, hey, this is what we got from FDA, this is what we got from Japanese health authorities. We need to find some middle way, or we need to try to, design a study that is for you guys acceptable. And then, of course, what you mentioned, Agnieszka, we also had a few situations where on paper it looked good, and then operationally it turned out to be a nightmare for, many reasons. So the KOLs are typically also very helpful, but we have also seen if the KOL is, very well-known professor with many years of experience, but at the same time probably a bit less operational experience lately, this is typically not the best person to consult your protocol. It's the best to go to the investigators that are actually treating the patients. That's true. Or have a day-to-day experience, because, to be honest, we had at least 2 or 3 this type of situations which really prolonged recruitment.
Yes, and if I can add, Anya, of course the KOLs, they are very important, but they have experience in efficacy studies, more or less, and you have to go to your phase 1 unit, which you start your first protocol with, to discuss with clinical pharmacologists, to discuss with experienced phase 1 investigators. And you have to go step back and to think about your general approach, whether you go with a multi-site study, multi-country studies, or, because we know that, of course, clinical research costs enormous amount of money, you probably would be able to enroll your entire study populations in a single site or in 2 sites. And I'm not only talking about healthy volunteers, but also patients or mixed studies. So you can save a lot of money thanks to the strategic thinking from the beginning, doing your internal feasibility even during you are still at preclinical phase, to see which countries you have to choose, taking into account, of course, regulatory landscape, access to patients and naive healthy volunteers populations, which is crucial for biosimilar projects, for instance, because we know there are lots of clinical research units in Western Europe, in Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, with lots of phase 1 units, but they are struggling with lack of biologically naive healthy volunteers. So it's something that you have to think. And probably we'll go to the timelines, thinking about timelines later on, because this is also something important that I would like to explore on.
I think maybe one more question. We had some interesting discussions with Magda before that. The location is one thing from, easiness or operational aspects, but at the same time, especially for new molecules, it's about prestige in a sense. So Magda, please go ahead if you want to.
Yeah, especially maybe from the perspective of the small company or biotech company which originated in the Polish biotech environment or in Central Europe, Eastern Europe. The way how you validate your research is something that has also supported it can be a selling point for your drug, because we found out during the way of preparation for the clinical development, but also it somehow came out from the discussions with potential partners for the assets which we are developing, that they asked, okay, but do you think that novel or innovation originated in the environment which is not well known globally as an innovative biotech hub, somehow validated in clinic only in Polish sites, would it be good selling product for the global companies? And in fact, it was like something that opened our eyes, that we know that we are doing good science and that we are trying to conduct in the way that it's excellent, good excellence, and that this is like the top level science. But we need to prove it to the people which have an access to the whole world, like global innovation, like big pharma operating in the US. They want to see the validation of our science conducted in the US. So if we want to enter the market in the US in the exit strategy for the assets which we are developing, we have to think about what is the data package or how the data is generated, so they can trust this data package.
Can I disagree? Okay, because of course I'm a patriot, so I would like to underline that of course it's crucial to have your data validated, and probably your regulators will also see and look into the prestige of the clinical research unit. But I would like to underline that we do have premium sites in Europe, including Central and Eastern Europe. What is important is your very thorough and careful validation of the site, including, of course, the system audit, information and feedback whether the site was FDA inspected, information on the expertise, consultants, the team. And I must say that we at Biokinetica quite a lot and quite often we are serving as the rescue site for the studies being started in the States or in Australia because of the favorable regulatory landscape. And we have this feedback from the sponsors that our data and what we are delivering and the speed of it is like, this is something that they perceive like on the highest level. So we have to remember that, of course, from the selling perspective, I understand that if you have the data collected from your efficacy trial in the States, it's very important. But please keep in mind that they are clinical research unit, experienced, premium, FDA inspected, also in Poland.
I know, and we conduct our clinical trials in Poland. That we are aware of that, and we are also patriot because we have our company in Poland and we conduct our science in Poland. We have our research site, we have our people here, and we want to do it here because we know that this is the future of also like for the country from the perspective of economic growth, and healthy people means strong economy, and this is something that we have to think about. What I'm saying is that we have to think how we want to sell the product or to whom we want to sell the product and what would make them feel safe with the data we generate. So, for example, we were discussing about this international trials that we can conduct something that will also supplement the studies which were performed in Poland. And in fact, we see that this is something that is addressing the needs of international partners. Yes.
Exactly.
Maybe we could use the microphone so that everyone else can hear you. That's a spontaneous comment.
Yeah, that's and sorry
He was
for
keeping
this.
it quite along.
Yeah, we know each other quite long. So the first thing is the question: where are the patients?
Yeah.
Because I think that one thing what you are missing in this discussion is that you need to know where is a patient with this disease and with this previous treatment. Second things, regulatory pathway for the approval of the study. And then the difference is between when the big pharma is doing study or middle pharma is doing, or even you doing study for yourself, and when you are doing study for a licensing out. And sorry.
I think that we
Mario.
touched all of these topics. Maybe we were not discussing all of them in details, but I think that we marked that this is the patient stratification or patient population we are targeting. This is also the regulatory which we are addressing, like Anya was telling about it. So I think that we raised the topics you are mentioning, but we are not able to discuss everything. And I am telling from the perspective and from the experience, which was very important for us in terms of also corporate development, how we were planning our clinical trials, how we were planning whole operations around it, what was the point for the selection of the CRO, and I think that we are coming to the last part of the panel, which we're planning, like what to do exactly, and
And Mariusz, just to discuss with you, of course, fully agree with you, couldn't agree more. But we have to remember that, and Anya, I believe Anya mentioned this in her introductory speech, that we are rather focusing on phase 1 trials. So for most of cases, healthy volunteers trials, except of course oncology, and more we see more complex phase 1 protocols, including patients. But for efficacy studies, absolutely yes. So you go where patients are. That's for sure.
Yes, and I think what we were also trying to bring today is the general question with whom and how we want to execute the study. I mean, there are different ways you can do one-stop shop type of organization that will, give you the know-how, the whole support, and will deliver you at least in theory, the clinical study report and everything ready, which is obviously more costly, and at the same time you're not really gaining that knowledge. You can do some modular combination, you can hire people, you can have consultants. So this is also, I think, the aspect which you need to address a bit earlier and decide which way you want to go. And I think it also depends on how many molecules you think you will have in your pipeline, whether you want to build this competence inside your company, or whether you just want to do it well, and then you want to go with a well-established CRO that is able to provide you with a final product without a major hiccups, at least in theory. But I think, if you can too, maybe comment on that.
Yes, so when we were thinking about the clinical development, first thing was that we had a consultant introducing us the whole path to this. So in fact, we were gaining external knowledge, how exactly what we are discussing today, how to prepare for all of this, what are the aspects we have to think about to prepare the whole company to conduct the clinical trials in the future. So first of all, it was decision, yes, we want to do it. So it was very important aspect. And then it was how to do it. So we were thinking about how to finance the clinical development, and the experience which we have, that it's very difficult to start clinical development without having money to conduct it, and even being prepared to conduct the phase 2. So this is something that we have to keep in mind, that having a financial perspective and secure the funding or different sources of funding, this is something that we have to think about, because it's going to be more expensive than the offer you will get from the CRO, which is telling we will do everything for you, and it's going to be doubled or tripled even. So this is the reality, that we have to have money to conduct the trial. So it's not only like science or rationale behind or access to the patients, it's also how much money we have and who will give us the money and what's the strategy for this, and the reality shows that you have to be prepared from the financial perspective for this. And when we were preparing also, our strategy was to get the knowledge from the consultants and from the people at the very beginning, which were guiding us. And based on the lessons which we get from the preclinical studies and from clinical studies, we started to build our capabilities in-house, and we started to establish our clinical team. So this was our strategy, because it allowed us to postpone the investments to secure money for the initiation of the clinical trial, because the cost for having internal clinical team operations and all experts in-house, it's tremendous. It's impossible even to imagine when you don't have experience with clinical development that it costs that much, because this is the knowledge, the access to people, this is the experience which you have to somehow attract to your company.
Absolutely, yes. And again, just to give some on-site, from-site perspective, I would like to say that it's really important when you are going and you are selecting a CRO or the site, starting with the CRO if you decide to do it like one-stop shop or simply have different vendors. Please check if the CRO or the consultancy company or the site has experience in early clinical development. It's really crucial, and we see it on daily basis, I would say, with the monitors, with project managers from the CROs collaborating with us or from the clinical team at the sponsor site. That lack of this early clinical development perspective can be and can cause many problems, delays on the sponsor side, and can cost you enormous amount of money. So starting from selecting the CRO with this phase 1 expertise, having either partnership with like dedicated specialized phase 1 unit, or many of them, of course, they have their own clinical research units. It's really, really essential. And to start this discussion, dialogue with clinicians from those sites, with clinical pharmacologists, and even you can always, and remember that when you are drafting your protocol, the sites are always open to provide you this clinical input, like we are doing together with Anna.
I'm smiling.
And we have developed several protocols together, and I remember a couple of them having quite a lot of different procedures which were redundant even, and this allowed the sponsor to save money, yes, because we didn't need so many ambulatory visits. This is just an example. And you can always have this discussion with the site from the very beginning.
And I just wanted to say that even for the companies like ours, which we have quite rich pipeline of small molecules, and we have more than clinical project, the failure, operational mistakes made for the early stage phase 1 trial can cost even the existence of the company.
Yeah.
It costs more than money. It costs sometimes the existence of the company. It can cost reputation of the company. It can cost the trust of the investors, in our case, investors to the company. So good preparation, especially when you do it for the first time, you will overpay. Definitely you will overpay, because lack of experience and lack of knowledge, it costs money. And in fact, we have to be aware of that for the first trial, we will pay more than it really costs, because we will pay for lack of knowledge, because I'm sorry for all CROs which are here, but CROs, there is no mercy sometimes, and they get money from the things they shouldn't get, or they are paid twice or 3 times in the offers. And we, even without having a lot of experience in clinical development, we saw that we were trying, like there were some redundancies which we had to pay 3 times even in one offer from one CRO. So it will cost more, but second time it's going to be easier. And then it's going to be something that will allow to save money.
It's always more difficult than with second. But I think, I wouldn't like to finish on this, negative note, what you need to have for clinical study a lot of money. But I think what is also quite clear, it's reaching out early enough, and I think not being afraid of getting know-how, advice, or some kind of guidance, not necessarily from CRO in the first place, but maybe also going to more specialized early phase units like you, Agnieszka, were mentioning. That's probably also a bit leaner and a wiser approach.
As Magda mentioned, of course, phase 1 is proportionally very expensive part, so you are going to the premium shop probably, and of course the mistake you make can result in the future of your company. So it's really important to have the trust in the partner you are selecting, the CRO and the site, to be sure that the data they are collecting
and
will
the way
serve
how they collect
and will guide you through the next stages of clinical research. So it's crucial, starting from the standardization of the procedure, even if it's a multi-site approach. Try to coordinate the dialogue between the investigators, between the two sites. Probably they could even merge some and could operate according to the general procedures. But first of all, think as soon as possible about the clinical phase and involving the clinicians into the dialogue. And last but not least, probably just about a couple of words about the timelines, because probably most of you are planning the first early clinical development phase. We are always asked by our sponsors, CROs, how quick you can start the clinical phase of the study, because it's crucial information for our top management, for our investors. We say, okay, the regulatory landscape in Poland is as it is. Of course, we are trying to make phase 1 trials being approved faster, but you have to remember and you have to look into your last patient, last subject, last visit, milestone, which is even more important for your further development of your product. And here, in this part of Europe, in Poland, and everybody knows that, of course, that we do have great recruitment potential, not only in efficacy studies, but also in phase 1 trials. Yeah.
I can confirm that, because I mean, at least for biosimilar field, Poland is very well perceived as a high-speed recruiter and also very reliable country, not only phase 3 but also phase 1. So yeah, we have a very good reputation.
And time is money, of course.
but which is somehow good for us who are developing the drugs, but for the patients it's maybe not the best information. But yes, for small molecules we can also see that recruitment in Poland is much faster, even the initiation of the trials. But there is one thing which I want to highlight, because I work for the business development and I'm focused on the commercialization of the assets which we have in our pipeline, including early stage assets. And there is something that we can do for ourselves even years back before we even have a development candidate. This is the reality check with the potential partners for the asset, because we learned a lot from the due diligence process with the partners, with big pharma companies, or with companies which do have experience with the development of clinical trials, but also with the implementation of the market. Because they ask a lot of questions on the assets, and they very often ask about what is your clinical strategy, what is your development strategy, what are the timelines, what is the patient stratification for you, where do you want to have clinical trials. They ask all of the questions which we have to ask ourselves to define what we want to do, and having due diligence and allowing companies to dig into our data, open the data room, discuss at the confidentiality level, and allow them or force the companies to give the feedback on the quality data or on the scope of the data or even about the way how we think about the potential market for the drug. This is something which is giving a lot of information of us. So I would encourage people which are focusing on even like startup companies or people which are thinking about how to touch the topic of the clinical development, that it would be good to learn from bigger brothers and let them, let's say, criticize our work and let them ask the questions which will guide us. And I have to say that due diligence process which was conducted on the project which is currently in the clinical development helped us a lot, because we realized the potential for the drug in the areas we were not thinking before. And of course, here we are touching the translational work on the drug, that not always the indication you select as the first one for the clinical development would be your leading indication, or the combinations. This is something which you can build on, and it's not always that you have like AML and it's gonna be AML as the drug for the AML. So it's good to let other people tell you what they think. Maybe not always listen every aspect, because you are the one who knows your project like fully, but let them tell what they want.
Now that I'm allowed to say what I want, time is up.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I mean, if there are any questions, please.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to open the floor.
Hello, I'm Ronald from the Polish Academy of Sciences. So I would like to ask about the classical number. They say 10% success rate in the development of a drug. Scientists would like to put in the problem is that we go from the animals to the human, and this translation is a big problem. We should use other technologies. Other people say, no, the problem is on clinical trials. If you have standardized data between all the countries, perfect translation from paper to computer, and better regulations, maybe would be better. But how much it would be better? From 10% to 20, 30? Just to have an idea. Thanks.
Thank you. Any comments?
Me either.
I think it's something that is project-based, or because we are discussing about the assets which are, let's say, innovative drugs. So I think that in case of novel drugs, this has to be somehow calculated based on the specific project, specific patient population. And we are not able to give you like it's going to be 17% because we would lie. So I think that there is no ideal world.
No.
I'm sorry.
We have 2 more questions.
It's not a question, it's more like a comment. It's therapeutic area based, because 10% it's like an average, but in some therapeutic areas it's even less.
Yes.
Like Alzheimer, for example. So really it depends on the therapeutic area.
Hi, I'm Łukasz Rambalski, and I'm from the Vaxican, the small biotech developing new drugs. And my question is about scientific advice. Thank you for your rich content, but I would like to go a little lower, because we are now preparing for the preclinical tests of what we are working with. So my question is, maybe there are 2 questions. One, when companies like ours should ask for the scientific advice, it should be also very early on the stage, on the time of development, or when we finish some preclinicals. And the
I see Wojtek would like to answer. No, I'm just
And
kidding.
Mariusz.
Go ahead. Mariusz.
and also who we could ask first, the European or the FDA, which are better on that, or is it
They are
like
both very good, I would say.
okay. So
The point is what-
because you said that you have some failures in the phase 1, did you ask for the scientific advice before that, or?
Are you asking if we were discussing with regulatory
Yeah.
before we started?
Yeah.
Yes, this is the formal way how you can do it, because you can be advised, but you have to have things. There is like the specific list of things you have to have, or the way how they should be prepared, and the data scope the regulator wants to see before you can get advice, because it's strictly regulated. You have specific time slot. There are specific topics you want to discuss. So it's not going to be that you will have a, let's say, date with FDA and you will discuss whatever you want, because they also need to prepare. So you have to have specific aspects you want to discuss with them, and they will not read all of your papers and all of your data. They will advise on the specific thing you want to be advised.
To go more, even you have to have your specified list of questions, very clear and detailed questions to the regulator for the scientific advice, because otherwise it's ineffective and you simply, lose your money. And it's not cheap.
Something tells me that the gentlemen here are trying to establish some kind of offstage competitive corner for you.
No problem.
Jokes aside,
Are you trying to kick us out?
Certainly not, I would imagine.
But we are
Any
the
other
last
questions from the center or left side of the audience? Anyone? Now, that's the luxury, I guess, of being the final panel of the first day.
It's not a coincidence, I know.
Nicolas Bezen, INI Bio. Do you think that the Polish authorities have grown with companies like Review, like Molecule, who have started their own innovative drugs, first in patients in Poland, and that it will be easier for the newcomers to access clinical trials in Poland?
So here I'm not so optimistic, because at least from the clinical side perspective and what the feedback that we have from our collaborating CROs and pharma and biotech is that still, of course, the Polish regulatory system needs education, especially in early clinical development. Of course, now everything is new because we have CTIS and everybody's just looking around, and current numbers are not so optimistic. However, and probably this is the statement that we wanted to make as well, together with innovative pharma here in Poland, biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies, CROs, firms and associations, and clinical research unit as ours, we should start this dialogue with the regulatory agency in Poland to make it more effective, the process, in terms of timelines, and also the quality of the feedback that we are receiving, because probably my esteemed colleague would say a couple of more words about this.
No, but I can comment maybe just a little bit. Of course, probably we want to get better, or we want to have it faster and somehow more efficient, but I can comment in the region. Poland is anyway quite I would say relaxed or flexible, because we typically, when we file the clinical trial application, we see, for example, Hungary, Czech, Bulgaria. I mean, the countries in the region are typically coming with more questions, being more difficult, not understanding at least biological drugs at all. And I think Poland has learned its lesson. I know it's not perfect, but it's definitely in this area of the world one of the easiest one to work with. So in a sense, I know we're not there yet, but I think it's also not that bad.
The impression that we have and that we shared with our clients is that for the standard processes, standard pathways in which you have your guidelines, guidances, they are quite straightforward, but if you would like to go outside the box to streamline or to make some processes or even to avoid some process like in phase 1, then it's becoming a bit harder. So you have to educate. And we are always having this open discussion with CROs, because now with CTIS, of course, it's a very time-consuming and resources-consuming process. So please put into the cover letter the information what your approach is, why we are doing this or this, because they will, or at least we can have, we can hope that they will understand, yes, your process, your understanding. Of course, please submit the letters, the feedback from scientific advices to BioTech's committee, to of course, central submission. It's really important to provide as many information as you have and justification into your first trial.
And maybe from the sponsor perspective, we know how it all started, and we have common friends in the business that we know how they learned their lessons. And I think that also the sponsors, the companies which are deciding to do the clinical trials on their own, first of all, they are learning what type of questions to ask, or they are learning what are the topics they have to touch. Even this type of events, this is something that we didn't have 15 years ago when we started to think about clinical development. There was not conference in Poland that I can commute one day and go and meet people which are working on the sites, or there are some other companies. So I think that from the perspective of the, let's say, business or the sponsor, we are also learning what are the key aspects. This is one thing. And also I can see that there is a community which is growing, and people are learning from each other. Like we have our Marcin, Paweł. These are the people which are not blocking themselves. They are collaborating. They are sharing experience. And I think that this is something that is making life of other people which are coming after them, they are making this life a little bit easier.
Anna, Agnieszka, Magdalena, before I invite Magda Kulczycka to join me for the closing remarks of day one, let me throw in a little extra question, because it was really interesting. It really, really was. You could see from the competition of the gentleman right there.
Thank you.
If we can predict one thing about the 2025 edition of BioForum, it is that everyone will want to be the last panel of day one for 2025. I was just reminded, I saw Joshi here, reminded of his book, Ron Atner's book, The Wide Lens, about businesses that go through all the critical stages, have a super interesting idea, and eventually fail for whatever reason. So my question to you all, a very, very quick one, because we talked about the entire cycle, so to say, ending up at clinical stage. If you were in the wishful thinking territory again, what is missing? Because you're rather conservative talking about Poland. We've learned some lessons, but then again, we're not the worst, etc., etc. So if you were to find the current most important bottleneck of all those stages leading to what you call success and the breakthrough and the reputation eventually, because you say that biomanufacturing is now perhaps one of the strongest. The talent on the market is very important. So how to bring all those together? What's the bottleneck? What is missing from this big and complex equation in your eyes? Number one thing.
You mean Poland specifically?
Yes, specifically.
So I believe that as the clinical research industry and pharma and biotech, we are quite united and we look into the same direction. But at least from my perspective, as representing the site, we are still missing the open and open-minded and willing to join the dialogue regulatory part of the scene. So still, and I remember because I'm in the early development industry for the last more than 20 years, and always the discussions with BioTech's committee were a bit tough, and then regulatory agency in Poland was not so willing to provide any kind of scientific advice or any advice at all. So we should make them have this dialogue with us.
So is it more about connecting the silos, or is it more about walking the talk more than talking the walk? Something like that? Because it sounds like from your discussion, but also previous discussions, that there are some low-hanging fruits that nobody is picking. for some reason, some regulatory, some budgetary, etc.?
I think it's also about the volume. I mean, volume of how many biotech companies we have. So what I wanted to say, what we are missing, we need
Critical
more
mass.
companies like Riveview, because then the discussion with the public, part will be easier. If there are 10, 15, 20 companies that need some change, it's a bit different leverage, whereas you have 3, 4, 5. So except the regulatory being open-minded, which was my first thought, is also the the amount of biotech businesses that are really doing the clinical studies here. So we need more companies like Magda's.
And this is what I wanted to say, that I think
we need more companies like yours.
yes, we do, because I think we need more focus on delivering bringing the fantastic science which is conducted at academia, various institutes, conducted by the scientists, the courage to bring it further, to validate it in preclinical studies and to put it to clinical, and to be open that it might fail, because statistics say that
Many of them
majority
will
of
fail,
projects they fail.
Most of them will
And
fail.
what I think is that all of us somehow struggle that the science which we do will be validated in the negative way, not in the
Right.
positive way. And the failure is painful, but so we struggle to start. And this is quite typical in different areas of life as well, like why people don't start their business, because they're afraid that it will fail. So then you can start another one. I think that, I'm sorry, but money is something that we can always find.
Exactly.
If the science is good, if the data package is there, if we have idea what we want to do, we will find money. It can be from the venture fund, it can be from the angels, it can be from the big pharma companies. Being aware that we have to bring it somewhere, and if the science is good, we will find money. I think this is let's say, business courage, to do it. And okay, I can fail or something, but then I will know better what to do.
Magdalena, thank you. I think Anna, a few minutes ago, insisted that she wanted at least twice to close the discussion on a positive note. So Anna,
I did.
now is your time to close this discussion with one sentence on a positive note. What is it?
So I think the positive note would be, let's not be afraid of clinical trials, because I think that has been for many years the message that, clinical trials is something big, very expensive, and hard to reach. I think what Magda was saying, the more molecules are close to the clinical phase or being validated even in the early ones, the better for everyone. I mean, including patients. So let's not be afraid of them.
Thank you very much for that,
Thank
and
you.
much deserved applause. It was
Thank
a brilliant
you.
discussion, ladies and gentlemen. And now, allow me, please stay seated. Magdalena Kruczycka, please join me on the stage. You're guilty of delivering day one of BioTech Forum. How are you feeling now? Are you relaxed? I'm not. I'm certainly not.
No, actually, I really enjoyed the final panel session, and thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. And what struck me the most, as organizer of this conference, was this creation of this critical mass of Polish biotech, more developed biotech companies. So I'm hoping that you had opportunity today to create networking possibilities, and because that is what it's all about, actually. And when others grow, we grow too. So I'm really hoping that this day was beneficial for you, and you enjoyed it as well. And thank you. And I also would like to ask you for applause, Łukasz, for magnificent performance and leading of the conference. Thank you. Thank you, Łukasz.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. Ladies and gentlemen, 6:30, we are meeting for the CEBioForum Awards banquet, as we call it, but as rumors has it, it turns into a party. So expect a lot of networking. Enjoy the evening, and I shall see you at 6:30. Thank you so much for day one, and see you in the evening. Thank you.